Good evening, Leslie. This presentation is about exploring digital media and the effects that it can have on adolescents. My name is Tanya Tomsic, and this presentation is being prepared for our PSYCH 355 class online in the winter 2017 semester. So one of the things that we've discussed a lot in this course is that adolescence is a time where essentially we are developing and trying to figure out exactly who am I. It's a time of exploration. It's a time of great growth, physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, if you want to throw that in there too, of course. And really, it's a time where we also have great vulnerability. Now, we've already talked about through the lectures online some of the ways that self-identity is formed in adolescence. For example, cognitive development, brain development and function, through social interaction with peers, and through interaction with parents. All of these things really impact the way adolescent self-identity is formed. One of the other big impacts can be their online identity and how they interact with digital media in general. One of the main questions, I suppose, that I want to address and that I'm interested in is really, is preoccupation with digital media harmful to adolescent development? Online, adolescents have the opportunity to create their own identity. They have the opportunity to reach out and connect with other adolescents. They have the opportunity to explore parts of the world that they normally wouldn't. All these wonderful things. But then we also hear about the kind of darker side of digital media. And I wanted to just do a brief investigation into this to see whether or not there seems to be more negatives associated with using a lot of social media, a lot of digital platforms, or whether or not there actually were some positives to that as well. So there are so many forms of social media and digital media out there. I mean, we've got Facebook, we've got Twitter and Instagram and Vimeo and Snapchat and, oh, Lord, how many other things, YouTube and blog sites, so many different places where adolescents are communicating with each other, are going to find information, right? So why are they using digital media so often? There are a number of reasons for this. First of all, we ask them to. A lot of schools now are providing iPads as early as kindergarten. I know this from personal experience. A lot of friends of mine have had to sign waivers saying that it's okay for their kindergarten child to use a tablet. Some schools even ask for a deposit. So this has been starting from a very young age. It seems perfectly natural then that one of the first places that an adolescent would go for information is the internet. Somewhere online, they're bound to find an answer, whether it's through a Google search engine or whether it's asking a question on social media, looking up news reports, researching for school. I mean, look at university students. One of the first places that we go to find research articles is the online database. We are very used to seeking out digital media, digital news, and using that in our daily lives. Specific to adolescents, though, there are a few reasons why they might go ahead and use social media even more so. So, a study by Michigan and Suarez Orozco looked at some of the main reasons why adolescents always seem to have social media as one of their main communication forms. So part of that is, of course, because everyone has smartphones nowadays, but a lot of it has to do with just the way adolescents are communicating today. So they're using social media to keep in touch with friends. They use their phones for texting. They use Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. All of these things are communication tools. They are supplementing their offline lives through sharing online. So what they mean by that is, if, let's say, for example, a youth is really involved in soccer and they want to stay connected to their soccer team. They may have soccer practice 3 days a week, but they may be connecting with the other members of their team several times a day through social media, posting pictures that say strengthen bonds through private jokes, that kind of thing, maybe posting pictures of their games, finding memes online to help bolster them up for an upcoming game, for example. So really just creating, I guess not creating, but expanding their offline world into the digital world through social media. And of course, they don't just do this through social media. There's also things like YouTube and blogging as well, where they may post videos of their team. Excuse me, much like this presentation is posted on YouTube. It's highly possible, and probable actually today, that youth will be recording bits and pieces, fragments of their lives, and putting it online for their friends to be able to access. Online sharing can also offer a sense of comfort. Just the idea that even if they're physically alone, they may be able to pick up their phone and immediately get in contact with a friend if they need to. This can be particularly beneficial for youth who have relocated. Now, their article specifically talks about relocating from one country to another country. However, I know from personal experience that when I was younger and relocated even within the province, and I've had friends who've relocated outside the province, it is very comforting to know that you can still contact them by email, by text message, and of course phone plans nowadays. A smartphone is practically a computer. And so you can access all of that right from the palm of your hand, which means if you're riding the bus on the way home and you feel lonely and you just want to hear from your best friend, you can send them a text and chances are good they're going to get back to you fairly quickly. Likewise, you can continue to share your life events through friends and family who are far away by posting photos or videos online. An article by Norden and Aiton specifically look at blogging in terms of how youth are using it for self-evaluation purposes, how they use it to, while they're debating an idea with themselves, they can put it out there online and not necessarily be more accountable for their ideas, but it's the same theory as when you are bouncing an idea off of someone that you're speaking with, excuse me, where you aren't really looking for them to provide a solution, but you know if you just talk to them long enough, you're going to come up with your own solution. And blogging in a public space also seems to have that effect. Particularly for youth who have moved to a new area or are integrating into a new culture, blogs can help them make sense of new experiences. So just the act of writing out, hey, this kind of strange thing happened to me today, and posting it online, excuse me, makes it a situation that they can go back to, they can refer to it later. Also, depending on the way a blog page is set up, They may also be able to receive comments from readers who can reassure them that this is a normal experience. So it can be really helpful to write and read about the similar experiences of others. Once again, another more positive aspect of sharing pieces of your life online. So a study by Best, Mancatillo, and Taylor also looked at adolescent males and whether or not they would seek out help for their mental health in an online community versus in the real world. And they did find that it was common to reach out to peers through social media. When youth are experiencing troubling times or concerns or doubts, they do reach out to other peers, and they will use social media for this. It's more anonymous, so it feels a little bit safer. And particularly male youth are reaching out online more so than in person, which is great because historically men have not been comfortable coming forward with concerns about their mental health or their mental wellness. It now does look as though online they are willing to come forward with those questions and those concerns. And it's also nice because the industry is starting to catch up with this. Professionals are starting to catch on to the fact that people are willing to reach out online, even if they're not in person. And so more and more professional resources are becoming available online, which is fantastic. The only problem is that the go-to place to get help or get information still seems to be search engines. So although there are professional services out there, a lot of people are just Googling symptoms or trying to find answers on their own as opposed to seeking actual professional help. And as we all know, that can be a little bit dangerous when it comes to the internet because you're never really sure if what you're getting is accurate information unless you're willing to go the extra step to research the website and who published on it. Historically, I know when I was growing up, my parents always used to say, stop watching TV, stop watching the boob tube, you're just going to turn into this zombie, and that was their main concern. That is not the only concern that parents, well, and that I guess many people have for adults today. Another major concern is aggression, is seeing violence on TV and in the media and in video games. Does that make youth more aggressive? Does this online life of communicating with people through only text messaging and social media, does that lead to loneliness and anxiety and other mental health issues? And then there's also the physical concerns of things like obesity and whether or not sitting around in front of the TV or the computer all day is actually seriously detrimental to the health of adolescents. So first, I just kind of wanted to take a look at the aggression factor. And this is something that, as I say, when I was growing up, it wasn't really a concern yet. But I think about the time I hit high school, it started coming out, if you play violent video games, you're going to be violent. So I did look at a study by Velke and Kuturovac-Jagodic, and they looked at the degree to which watching violence on social media and playing violent video games seem to incite aggression in youth. And they had some yay moments. So first of all, not all adolescents are affected to the same degree. So if You have 10 teenagers sitting around and they're all playing, oh, I'm trying to think of a violent video game, Call of Duty or something like that. Not all of them are going to be immediately overcome with the desire to be aggressive towards other people. It varies in degrees. Now, ideally, we would like no influence from a violent video game or a violent clip on social media. I mean, keeping in mind the news has changed dramatically. Now, even what they show on the evening news is incredibly graphic and can be very violent. All these kinds of news clips can be found on YouTube, they can be shared on social media, Facebook, all of these types of sources where adolescents are exposed to them. And one of the good things is that parents can actually have a role in reducing aggression after watching these sorts of broadcasts. So they talk about in this study two kinds of mediation. One is active parental mediation, and what they mean by that is if you're watching something violent on the news with your youth, then talking to them about what they're seeing and how that affects people, this sort of thing. That would be active parental mediation. Restrictive parental mediation refers to restricting the length of time that adolescents spend in front of the computer, watching TV, playing video games, these sorts of things. Both do help reduce aggression. So this study looked at self-disclosure as to how aggressive youth were with their peers specifically. I think mostly to do with bullying, verbal aggression, that sort of thing. And essentially, when parents use restrictive mediation and they cut down the amount of time that youth are spending playing video games, spending on social media, spending in front of the computer, that does reduce aggression to start with. But the active parental mediation actually has a much greater effect at reducing aggression. Oddly enough, peers, I say oddly enough, but that's really no surprise when we've learned that peers are a major source of social support for adolescents. They also can influence aggression. However, they can influence it for better or worse. So the ideal situation would be watching or playing these types of video games with peers who are not aggressive, who do not have an aggressive response. That's much better than watching this type of media or playing violent video games alone. And then even more, something more to avoid is watching violent media or playing violent video games with peers who are already aggressive. That can actually increase aggression towards peers. So just an interesting thing that they pulled up in this. There are some effects on physical health of excessive social media use, and I shouldn't say social media use, any kind of digital media. Essentially watching TV, playing on the internet, using social media, sitting on your smartphone. And Morton et al. Looked at a variety of tasks that students, in particular youth, are doing that pretty much gives them a sedentary lifestyle now. And this kind of lifestyle where there's relatively little activity, lots of sitting, can lead to reduced cardiovascular health. Oddly enough, Reduced academic performance in school, which I find really interesting considering that we spend most of our time sitting, and of course places us at a higher risk for obesity. Now there are some effects on mental health, specifically for adolescents, and some of these effects are things like, according to Kahn and Burton, the higher the screen time, the more likely an adolescent is to experience depressive symptoms. So very high screen time linked with depression. Also, a higher screen time was linked with poor physical activity levels. So the more time youth are spending in front of the screen, the less activity they're doing. Makes sense, right? Also, low activity levels increase the risk for depression over and above the high screen times. So if you have a youth who is watching TV 5 hours a day, excuse me, which sadly was not uncommon in their study, but that youth is still getting vigorous physical activity for, say, 2 hours a day, their risk for depression is not as bad as someone who is watching TV for 5 hours a day and doing 30 minutes of vigorous exercise. So we've looked at some of the physical and mental downsides to spending a lot of time online. And if you are experiencing some of these physical symptoms, like, for example, risk of obesity, as well as being at a risk for depression, then this is also placing you at a higher risk for things like cyberbullying, isolation, anxiety, and probably more as well. A study done by Underwood and Einrich took a look at some of the negative experiences that youth face in the online community. And some of these experiences are things like victimization, so being made a scapegoat, being picked on, being directly bullied online, exclusion, so not directly bullied, but perhaps if you are seeing pictures of a party where all your friends were invited and you weren't, this can lead to feelings of isolation, loneliness, even abandonment. Excuse me. Having a skewed view of themselves and others. If youth are constantly looking at social media where all their friends post perfect pictures with retouched photos and always having fun, they might come to believe that those people are never unhappy, and they might come to believe that maybe there's something wrong with them. Likewise, if they're looking at social media and their friends are constantly posting pictures of themselves, say drinking, this sort of thing, the youth who's looking at the social media account might come to think of this as daily behavior that's really common, and might start wondering why they're not also drinking every day, this sort of thing. It's also possible to experience an inaccurate sense of belonging. So it could go either way. Either the youth could believe that they're part of a group when that group hasn't really accepted them, but they've been accepted as a friend online, that sort of thing. So they could feel as though they have a connection to a group of people when in reality they don't. And oppositely, as I said, for reasons of exclusion and that sort of thing, there really might not be a particular reason. An exclusion might not be deliberate, and yet now they feel like they don't belong to that group anymore. Excuse me. Also, as discussed in some of the online lectures, youth often have a sense of being watched and judged by everybody. Well, when you're posting things online and you get a couple of negative comments, it really does feel like the entire world is watching. So any mistakes that are being made can be seen as more disastrous. And of course, there's the constant comparison. So, you know, every time your Facebook notification goes off and someone has posted another picture, you're comparing yourself to their picture and your profile to their profile, and it's just a constant barrage of comparison. So a good question to ask would be, how much is too much social media use? And really, they don't have an actual answer for us. A study by Bagné et al. Took a look at a variety of other studies to see what the consensus was about how much is too much time online, and there is no real consensus, which is not that surprising. If you think about, for example, I'm no longer considered a youth, but I work in an office, so I get to work at 9, I work till 3, I work on a computer all day. I drive to school, I go to school from 4 p.m. until, say, 10 p.m. roughly. I'm required to sit in my seat, use a laptop, look at things online. If you're a student, is that excessive use? No, probably not. But if you are a youth and you're spending all day in school online, and then you come home and you're spending all evening online through social media or just watching videos or TV, this sort of thing, then yes, that might be considered excessive. The other issue that these researchers found is that it's hard to come up with accurate definitions for excessive internet use. Yes, there's heavy internet use, but when is it too much? And is that in line with what kind of use there is? So as I was saying earlier, does it make a difference what the internet is being used for? Is 4 hours of internet use too much when you're looking up YouTube videos on how to apply makeup? Or is 4 hours of researching papers too much? Is there a difference? Are they the same? The other thing that makes this a difficult area to study is that it's hard to find appropriate tools to measure digital media use. Not a lot of measurement tools have been created that are consistent and that can be used in a variety of different studies. The other thing is that youth are notorious for using many different kinds of social media, and so it's very difficult to keep track of social media use and other digital media use. So for example, okay, maybe I spent an hour on Facebook, but while I was on Facebook, I was also watching YouTube videos on the TV and texting one of my friends. Well, does that still count as 1 hour, or should we be counting all of these different digital media formats separately? So that's another challenge. So these same researchers pretty much decided that the best way to decide whether or not youth are experiencing social media addiction or excessive social media use is through using the Bergen Social Media Addiction Scale. They thought this would be particularly useful in school settings. Now, whether or not schools will actually implement this in order to test whether or not digital media use is excessive is a good question. When schools are demanding that youth continue to use digital media formats for school assignments and communication, such as emailing the profs and things like that, I honestly am not sure how they're going to use any sort of tool to decide whether or not internet use is excessive. My personal choice for trying to decide whether or not digital media use is excessive in teens, particularly if the teen is your child, I'm going to go out on a limb here and I'm going to go with common sense. If you notice that all a child is doing is coming home from school and playing on the internet, if they are spending more time doing FaceTime with their friends than they are actually going out, and for lack of a better word, I'm sure youth would absolutely hate this, but instead of going out and playing with their friends, let's say hanging out, that sounds a lot more teenagery. So if they're living mostly in a virtual world and not really seeing other youth their age, then I would say, yeah, that's probably an issue. And I mean, moderation, always good, right? So I don't think there's anything wrong with limiting the amount of time that a youth spends online, even for things like homework, that sort of thing. Excuse me. And just making sure they have the opportunity to be active, get away from the screen. And I think a lot of that can be done through modeling. I really do. I think that when youth are around people who want to do interesting activities, that they will kind of naturally move towards that. But yeah, so those would be my two things. I don't know many people that have that social media addiction test handy, but as I say, if you look at it from a common sense and moderation point of view, I think it's is a lot easier to cut back on digital media use. So that concludes my brief presentation on the kind of general effects of digital media on adolescents. And of course here we have my reference list. Goes on to the next page. And that is everything. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and thank you for the extension.